Hi, good afternoon, Jen. It's wonderful to have this opportunity again to just be able to ask you some questions. And I know from our last interview, we also wanted to have a look at what the inner critic means and how
Mm.
it can be explained maybe in like a practical way, and how we could approach it. So
Mm.
I'd like to ask you some questions. And the first question is, what is the inner critic, and how does it affect our well-being? In your
Mm.
view, how would you, in your own experience, what have you noticed?
Mm. Yeah, that's such a good question, Shelley. And I like that you say in your experience because there's so many different definitions of the inner critic and how it affects our well-being. So speaking from my perspective, I think where I've seen for myself and in my clients where that inner critic has showed up is as usually a negative voice, what would be seen as a voice that says, you can't do it, or you're not adding value, or you can't add value. Or I spoke to somebody today who was talking about their self-worth and consistently feeling like they're not good enough. And it was a voice that they'd taken from their past, actually from one of their parents. And it was really hard for them to not transfer or project that voice or that view onto somebody else, whether it be in work or in life. So I think that inner critic is generally one that breaks us down, that gets in the way, that says you can't, and that stops us from reaching our full potential.
Right, because I think the research that I have just come across,
Mm.
recently, with just some people that I've also known that have struggled with this, and just looking at various sources, is that toxic shame can also be part of that factor as well. When people experience a toxic shame, or even when they've had past trauma, that can also trigger the inner critic in a negative way. So I think it's just
Mhm.
ways to kind of identify that, and to notice that. So
Mm.
that's why I thought this question was quite important. And then another question I thought about asking is, how can we effectively observe our critical thoughts and identify those high stress levels in the work environment,
Mm.
or whatever you've encountered?
Mm. Yes, I think that really is a trick, is how to observe it, as you say, and not just go with it, because all too often we go with that thought unconsciously and as if that is, life as it would be, life as usual. And so, in order for us to be able to observe it, I think that first takes us slowing down. And so there's an awareness of, hang on, I'm not feeling very comfortable. I'm not feeling very confident. I'm not feeling very at ease. And taking note of those emotions or that uneasiness that comes into our bodies physiologically or mentally, and then thinking, hang on, what triggered that? And then being able to go back to that and say, let me investigate that further. Let me be curious about it rather than just judge it or just try shut it down. And so one of those ways to slow down would be breathing. Such a simple thing, but so effective. And I find just taking 3 deep breaths, in for 4, hold for 4, out for 6, hold for 4, doing that 3 times really helps me slow down my heart rate, get oxygen to my brain, think more rationally and less from a reptilian brain perspective. And then I think with that, we can be curious, as I say, about our thoughts and say, that's interesting that I'm thinking that way. Why am I thinking that way? What triggered it? What are other ways of viewing the situation? And really move from there with whichever the process might be to be able to evaluate it and see, is this a real threat? Is it something I should be listening to? Is it valid? Or is it just something that's a hardwiring that I need to adjust and learn to build another roadmap in my brain?
And like, I think it's almost having a different perspective as well. Maybe
Mm,
looking at something more like objectively, like you're the fly on the wall in your own life, and you're basically looking at it from that way, and
I
seeing
love
it,
that.
seeing it from a different point of view, and just taking
Yeah.
that time, slowing down, and really reflecting on the situation
Mm,
you're facing, and seeing
mhm,
whether this is true, and whether my response is the right response as well. And yeah, I think just
yeah.
evaluating that, and meditation is really key as well, is taking that
Mm,
time to meditate, so that your brain has that time to process, and
mm,
the breathing could also happen through that as well. So I think that's really
yeah, I love that. And I think, Shelley, sometimes we're not always equipped to come up with that other view that we're talking about. And so that's where a trusted friend or a business partner or a coach or someone like that is really helpful to speak to, and maybe a therapist in some cases,
Mhm.
to say, help me get a different view, help me to find what is the real view, what is the truthful view, and to not give into something like, what many people call, for example, imposter syndrome, and to not see like, oh, I'm trapped in this and I just can't think of another way. We're also there for each other. Community and relationships are so helpful for overcoming ways of thinking that are negative, or that are, helping that inner critic shift.
Yes, correct. Yes, so we have these channels in our community. It's just identifying which channel would be appropriate for our own situation and well-being. And
Yeah.
another question is, what feeling do I need in the present? Because I think a lot of times the inner critic is trying to communicate something to you, but sometimes we don't know what is the actual need that we actually need to be fulfilled. Like some of these needs could be a need for love, connection,
Yes.
intimacy, confidence, pride, and the ability to accept oneself. So
Yeah.
I think that's quite important to recognize, because sometimes when the inner critic comes, it's easy just to be very reactive and to act on the moment, but not to take time to evaluate where it's taking you to. And
Yes.
you know, where does it want to
Yeah.
take you to? So it's just taking a step back, maybe looking at the situation again and seeing what is the need
Yeah.
behind this. And then once you've
Yeah.
identified the need, then perhaps you can see, okay, what resources can help me fulfill that need.
Exactly. And I love what you're saying about where is this taking me to? It's really helpful, as you say, to step back and say, if I follow this way of thinking, where is that going to land me? Whereas if I make an adjustment right now, how will my different way of thinking impact my behavior and help me get to a different place? So yeah, I love that kind of, what you're saying, that visualization of where are we going with this?
Right.
Mm,
And another question I thought of asking is how to notice when the inner critic is online. So just when it's in your radar, when it's around you.
yes.
And what is it doing to get our feeling and needs that lead us into the future? Because that could either go the other way, there are two directions. One is the
Mm,
negative way, one's the positive way. So what are
mm.
some strategies that we could use?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And often we do look for our needs being met online. So I mean, I've experienced before, maybe I'm tired, or maybe I'm bored, or maybe I'm wanting to feel energized, and then it's tempting to just, oh, let me just go to Instagram, or let me just go to Facebook, or let me just go somewhere where I can almost get that quick fix or that adrenaline, from, oh, look at that, or connect with this person. And there's not, it's not like, oh, there's no place for that and that's always bad. But if I'm keeping on going to those places to get a need met, then I've got to think, is that so healthy? Because we will always have a need and we're looking for that need to be fulfilled. And I think it's so important to think, what is the most healthy way to fill that need? So if my confidence is hinging on how many likes do I have on my post, or what are people saying about me, or what is so and so doing, that's not going to be lasting. I've rather got to go into those online places and go in it from a place of where I'm already feeling content, or I'm already feeling confident, already feeling connected. And maybe that's a healthier way to go into those spaces. And sometimes, Shelley, you're saying, we've got all of these needs, and some of them can be quite deep, and some of them can be not so deep. Some of them could just be, I'm tired, I'm hungry, I've had a hard week, and maybe the answer is just a good night's rest or a hearty meal if I can get hold of one. It's not always psychological, and I think that's also something to evaluate. Is my need isn't always something that needs to be digging up the trenches of my past. It could be a simple
Correct.
solution sometimes.
Yeah, something, just like a shift, or, like a healthy distraction. Something that I've noticed about your life is that you exercise, you're quite active. Could you share with the audience about some things that you do that help your well-being?
No, sure. But I think probably the one I post the most about that people would probably know is I love cold water. And so it's so invigorating, refreshing, and such a wonderful sense of community in our group, where we go off to the sea early in the morning. In winter, it's still dark. And there we meet with a group of people and we go into this beautiful cold water, stars, moon. Sometimes we watch the full moon set over the sea, sometimes see the sunrise coming across the water. And I think it's that combination of nature, of community, of health, of rebooting. And so that's something that I just love. You know, it's good for me on every level, spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally. It's a wonderful holistic activity. So that's my number one.
So that's your secret ingredient,
Yeah,
to
that's not a
connect with
secret.
nature in a deep, intimate way that can help.
That's my exercise that I think does the most for me. Yeah.
So it kind of rejuvenates you and
Mm.
energizes your spirit when you need
No,
that space
completely.
just to get your energy where it needs to be.
And it doesn't mean it's something I always feel like doing. You know, my friend and I were
Mm.
speaking the other day, and, you know, we often walk into the sea in the dark thinking, what is wrong with us? Are we crazy? Why are we doing this? But, you know, after 10 minutes or so, you're like, this is why I'm here, you know, and we come out, and that day is different because of that. So I think it's for all of us to figure out, what are our bodies asking for? What are our minds, our souls, our spirits asking for? What does it for us? Some people, it's, you know, mountain
running
biking
running
or
like me,
running.
when I need to
There you go.
have time for myself. Yeah, that
Mm-hmm.
helps a lot. Yeah, that's
Love that.
great. One of the important questions here that I didn't want to miss in the session was that, sometimes the inner critic will be driven by, previous authority figures. So that could be parents in our
Mm,
previous, in the past. And also maybe, when we're working in certain situations, there might be certain personalities that might influence, the way we think. And how
mm,
can we stick to being authentic, and
mm.
kind of driving that inner critic to really think in a positive light, and helping us, to be authentic and to really just be
Mm.
ourselves instead of putting on those masks, because that's quite challenging.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's very challenging. So, you know, firstly, I think I mentioned there was the person who shared about how she has the sense of not being good enough that sometimes gets in the way of her well-being in terms of her mood, her productivity, her confidence, her stepping out. And she could clearly say that's from one of my parent figures. And it's something that I need to actively keep assessing and keep rewiring.
Mm-hmm.
So there is that. And then I think on the topic of authenticity, none of us is perfect. All of us are struggling, and it's authentic to be real as imperfect. I think when we try and show up as perfect, that's not authentic. And I had such an interesting conversation with somebody who was in a coaching session the other day. And she was really struggling with the idea of going onto social media some more to be able to promote her personal and professional brand on LinkedIn. And she was like, oh, but you know, I don't want to go on there because authenticity is so important to me, and I don't want to just do it for the sake of doing it. And so what we really talked about is one of her values, and something she's very naturally good at is encouraging other people. And
Interesting.
so it's more about being authentic to your values than following your emotions. And I think that's what trips people up sometimes, is they think authenticity means I must only do something if I feel like it. And being authentic to our emotions is not authentic, because our emotions don't always reflect us or reflect our
Correct. Yes.
values. And who knows what they're driven by? It's like, you know, I say it could be hunger, it could be hormones, could be anything. And when she thought of it like that, yes, encouraging people is one of my values. So I am authentic if I show up to encourage other people, even when I don't feel like it, because it's not based on my emotions. And that really kind of, you know, helped the penny drop for her and gave her courage and confidence to say, I'm going to step out more. And it's not all about me. It's to really build others up.
Right. And I think one of the key points here is also what is important to you. you know,
Mm-hmm.
identifying that, because, you know, you're living for yourself and you really want to, you know, be as genuine as possible. And I think
Yes.
one of the things that I do with my clients, you know, when I first meet them and I have a discovery session, is I suggest that they can do the VIA personality quiz, which is free online,
Mm-hmm.
which I can attach
Mm-hmm.
later onto this link on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, there it just shows their strong points, what really they feel that matters to them, what's important, because everybody's
Mm-hmm.
different. And it's good to
Yeah.
identify the 5 strengths, perhaps, and then, you know, to see what is your values, because that's
Mm-hmm.
where your authenticity is going to come out. And that
Yes.
is what's going to help you to steer your self-critic in, you know, the right way, and not in, you know, the negative way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a
Yeah.
guide that people can use, which I
I
can add
think that
later.
sounds great. Yeah, I think please, yeah, do attach that, Shelley. I think it'll be very useful. And I think to build on something you've said there is it is about us. It's about how we're wired, our values, our strengths. But if we go in with the motivation of it's all about me, that's where we get stuck. And so it's saying, who am I? What are my values? What are my strengths? But how do I use these to make a difference in the world, to
Mm,
add value to other people's lives? Because that's what brings meaning and purpose. If it's all about me and for me, then that's a very limiting place and a very unfulfilled place. So I think, you know, something that I resonate with you is that we're here to give and take whatever we have inwardly and give that outwardly into the world so that we can make a difference and leave the world a better place.
and that does lead to the last point here, where it says that, you know, if we have a goal to work on this and steer it in the right directions, we want to engage more with the community, find resources in our community that we can work towards, and
Mm-hmm.
projects that we're passionate about, instead of just being stuck in the world, in our minds. Because, you know,
Yeah.
sometimes it's easy, you know, for introverts, or, you know, some people just lean towards it, to be at home and, you know, just to be stuck in their own mindset, because maybe it's more complacent
Yeah.
that way. But to, you know,
Yeah.
to maybe get out of your comfort zone a bit and see what are some resources out there that you could use to help you serve in the
Mm.
community better, and to work towards something that you're passionate, so that you know, fulfill your purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. Yeah, thank you, Shelley.
Yes, we are coming to an end. Is there anything else before we, before we wrap up? Any goals that you think from your experience that we could look into for the future? You know, to steer it in the right way, you know, the right direction.
Mm.
Is there any other goals that coaches could use?
I think I really like what you've said about going into something that can help you understand your values, help you understand your strengths, because those are going to be what help you shape your goals. I think putting together a goal is never something that is a quick fix or an easy 1, 2, 3 step, and that's unique to each person. So I think it really takes doing that groundwork first and spending time on formulating that goal, visualizing it as something specific, because otherwise, if we do that too quickly, we're probably going to end up chasing in the wrong direction, and we need to use our time in the best way in this world.
Thanks for that wonderful, valuable reminder, Jane. And it's been
Mm.
lovely to have this discussion with you this aftennoon. And
Thanks. You too,
thanks for
Shelley.
sharing your experiences.